but the numbers seem to be slowing down a little bit, so I'll get started. I'd like to call to order the November 18, 2020 meeting of the Cohasset School Committee, which is being held virtually via Zoom in accordance with Governor Baker's declaration of state of emergency in this Commonwealth. This meeting, as all our virtual meetings have been, is being streamed live on Facebook, as well as Cohasset 143 TV. Before I start the meeting, I'll ask all the committee members in attendance to please indicate so in roll call format. Mrs. Colery.
Present.
Mr. Kearney.
Present.
Mrs. Marr.
Present.
Mrs. St. Ange.
Present.
Present. Craig McClellan. We will start, as we always do, with public comment. Public comment is reserved for points of discussion that are not related to agenda items. So if there are any public comments, I'd ask individuals to make those now. I'll give it a second just to see if anything comes in before moving on. Okay, I don't see any, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the superintendent's report. Turn the meeting to our superintendent of schools, Dr. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman McClellan. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We do not have a student advisory update today. I gave Caroline the night off. She'll be back. And actually, we're meeting once again with my student advisory council, which those were really important meetings last year. And it's nice to have those up and running again. So I hope to have a couple other guest appearance, or I should say advisees presenting at future meetings. So it's kind of nice to have a rotation. I thought that worked really well, give some different perspectives last year. So I look forward to instituting that again. Obviously, this was a tough week. We had a situation that, obviously got a lot of press regarding the house party that had happened in town. And just want to speak about it for a second, just to make sure that, first of all, that everyone knows that when I have to make a decision as a superintendent based on information that's provided to me, I never do so in isolation. I don't make any decisions in isolation that are of major importance to the district, and this certainly I didn't. I consulted with health officials, our health agents, with our town manager, with our police chief, with our fire chief, and of course I brought in my administrators and leaders. So when we're making a decision that that has a huge bearing on not just the students but the town, it may be my final decision, but it's not one that is made without complete consult of those safety officials. And in particular, this case, because of the pandemic, our health agents. So in considering the situation, obviously always safety is paramount. Safety is paramount in everything we do. And those who know that and have been watching the school committees and have been obviously following the way we're progressing, know that I'm a big advocate in trying to create situations where we have more in-person learning if it's safe to do so. But I'm an advocate in safety. I'm an advocate in making sure that we have the environment that provides safety for our students, for our staff, and for our families going forward. I have to say that the decision that was made was in no way meant to be punitive. And having said that, I know it had an effect on a great many people. It had an effect on students who are playing sports. And I know it affected families. So I don't take the decision lightly. I would never make a punitive decision. The decision was solely based on the safety measures and the need for safety within our community. Some of the factors that I really took into account, we took into account as we were discussing, were the amount of students who were at the event, the fact that the event, as noted by the police, was not following the governor's orders of mask wearing, social distancing, and there were also, and I've heard different tellings of this, but there were certainly students, young people seen running away from the event, which gave us no real control or a thought on who might have been there. And even based on the lists that were identified by the police, there were clearly more people at the party, and potentially far more or a lot more people at the party. Having looked at all that and really trying to make the best decision about stopping what could be super spreader events, not being able to control the fact that this party did not have those safety measures in place, and not being able to control what that situation might amount to, knowing that we wouldn't be able to successfully trace any of that, and looking at the impact that an event like that, if someone does have COVID or is positive for COVID, could have on our entire community. It was the prudent decision, and the decision that I made, to halt in-person learning until November 30th, which gives us the required amount of days to make sure if someone did have COVID-19, they would be able to quarantine. It wasn't made lightly, and I know it affected the middle school as well. And a lot of that had to do with not only, obviously we didn't know who was exactly at the party, but the associations between the high school students, the middle school students, having a great more amount of siblings from the high schools. Particularly, this was mainly, if not solely, a senior class event, but we don't really know that. But looking at the odds of the seniors and who they have as siblings, and how very few siblings the senior class have in the elementary grades, it was my prudent decision, or the decision I thought that was best for the community, to halt in-person learning until we can get a handle on what the ramifications could possibly be from that party, and making sure that we move forward in a safe way. And that date is November 30th. So I just wanted to put that out there, so people knew, what my thinking was, what my process was, and the fact that it's something we'll move on from. Unfortunately, we're in a situation in the pandemic that our individual actions do affect the whole group. And as we've been preaching from the very beginning, it's really important that we all follow the safety measures, because we do impact each other when we don't. And once again, I sincerely hope people understand that my decision was made to try to keep people safe, and that's really all that it was about. Anyway, I don't know if the committee wants to talk about that in any way, or I should move on to my report, but I felt I needed to say that to the community.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sullivan. I think those are appropriate remarks. Thank you for making those. Anyone on the committee have anything to say? So moving on.
Yeah, and we'll move on. Just know that we're also aware of trying to. It did amount to only 3 days in person. I say only, if they're valuable days, but we kind of lucked out in the terms of the 2 week. We had the shortened week this week. But I also understand that it hit at a time when a lot of our students were in sports tournaments. We were very happy that we were able to provide sports for almost a full season. But I know for some teams, and sports were very important to me as a young person, that those moments are really important, particularly as you get towards the end of the year. So that weighed deeply on me, and I know that our wonderful coaches will work with students to provide some closure on that. But I want everyone to know that I didn't take that fact lightly either. So I will move on and talk a little bit about where we are right now. December 9th is the anticipated start date for our alternating in-person Wednesdays. So on December 9th, it is anticipated that our cohort A will go in person on Monday, on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday. And the following week, our cohort B will go district-wide. This is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in person. We, in bargaining with the CTA, do anticipate that the elementary day, because of our need to provide the contractual prep time and common planning time, and given the situation, that will be an abbreviated day, but we're certainly going to try to maximize in-person learning as much as we can contractually do in our bargaining with our teachers. So we'll have more information on the exact time of that moving forward. But I wanted everyone to know where we were right now and where we stood with that. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Scollins in a second to give some updates, but I don't know if there's any comments or any questions from the committee about, this very active week that we've experienced here in Cohasset.
Well, Dr. Sullivan, there were two statements posted. I'll take them as public comment. I mean, obviously this isn't necessarily an agenda item. It's something that I think it was incumbent upon you to speak about. So I'll just, someone's trying to have their voice heard, so I do want to make that heard. Mr. Christopher Allen, who I believe resides on Pleasant Street, I don't know the exact address number, it's not included with his post, states that the superintendent has canceled school with 0 positive COVID data. Does this mean that a gathering of 11 people triggers school closing? Aren't all the measures in place at the school for the purpose of this very situation? He also posts Dr. Sullivan's statements replete with hypotheticals and conjecture. Is the school committee at all concerned with this, that 0 data was taken into account? I think Dr. Sullivan, you pretty much answered, provided the response.
Yeah, I mean, the really what we're concerned with was that the governor's order was not followed, which, those orders are put in place for the safety of everyone involved. And when those orders aren't followed, that's when these super spreader things happen, and it can endanger the community. And I'm not, as the leader of the school district, I'm not willing to take that risk for our staff, for our students, and for our families. I'm just not. So
Can I also say something?
Yeah.
I
Sure.
feel like I understand the sort of, anyway, thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for making the decision that you made and for explaining it. I think it's important for us to understand that, clearly this is an administration and a leadership team that values data. There are pie charts and bar graphs galore that we review at these committee meetings. And the thing that happened with this social gathering is that there wasn't any data that was reliable. So we were flying blind in a pandemic. And so I think that you made the prudent choice given the information that you had, and I support it. And I want to thank you for it.
Thank you, and I respect the comment. It just wasn't an easy decision, but safety is the most important thing I do as a district leader, is to provide as much safety as I can for the district, and that will always govern my actions. And I'm conservative when it comes to safety. I am.
I'd just like to make a comment too.
Go ahead.
Dr. Sullivan, we support you 100%. We understand that. But I just want to also, as a parent, want to say how much we understand it too, because I think that Cohasset's probably the biggest 2-parent working parents, probably community in the state. And for this to impede in our lives is tough. It's tough, not only number one on the children, because we all believe, as the governor does, and most administrators would say, that we want kids in school. That's what we want. That's the number one goal, is to get kids back in school. And this set us back. This set us back as a school district and as parents. And we're taking this serious. But there's also a message out there to the parents or to people that are having these parties. Come on, guys. This is a community effort. This is to get our kids back to school. We're trying to do this every single day. And Dr. Sullivan, I know and I don't know all the stress that you're going through, or some of these things, and that just adds more stress to us all. So I think the message should be, listen, don't have these parties. It's irresponsible, and it reflects on all of us. We all want to get the kids back to school. And I just want the community to know that we're here to put the kids back into school and to keep everybody safe. And Dr. Sullivan, I just want to say again, we are 100% behind you.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And and it was obviously the magnitude of the event too. And it was a combination of factors. And like I said, I didn't make it in isolation. It was a safety official guided decision.
There's one more posting from Mr. Allen. And Mr. Allen, this will be the last comment that I can take from you on this point, just because it's clear that you obviously oppose the decision, and I value your input and your right to provide input at the meeting. But at some point we got to take a limit on sort of repetitive comments. So I'm going to read the last comment from Mr. Allen related to this issue. Where is the data indicating that there is increased risk from the events of Friday night? Do I understand that the superintendent said that the real problem was the disobedience of the governor's order?
Well, I mean, the only thing I'd say is that the data comes from the ramifications of these events all over the country. And when these things happen, this is when the super spreader events happen. And I'm not about to put Cohasset in that position.
Mrs. Marr, yes, please.
Yeah,
please.
I'd just like to comment that, the reason that we haven't had incidences in school, unlike some other districts in our buildings, is because of the safety measures that Dr. Sullivan and his team have put into place. And those, we can look at the data points on that the incidents are low because of those safety measures. The other important thing is, another data point is, there were a certain number of kids identified, and there were an unknown number of party goers not identified. And it's the fact that we cannot conduct contact tracing on those unidentified party goers that supported this decision. We don't know who they were. We don't know who they're in contact with. And it's too big of a risk, as all of these super spreader events have shown, to put our entire school district at jeopardy. So I support Dr. Sullivan's decision, and I do feel there was data behind it.
Thank you, Mrs. Marr. Listen, there are three general categories of responses to this type of situation. And in this instance, Dr. Sullivan kept all parties informed and collaborated with many town officials and administrators. But, you can either ignore the fact that there was a gathering. You can either err on the side of extreme caution and demand that or dictate that the whole district goes remote for the 2-week period, or you can settle on an option in which reason meets with caution. And that is precisely what the district did in this instance. Dr. Sullivan did not close the entire district. He closed 2 of the 4 buildings, and not closed. We just went fully remote. I understand that people are using that term synonymously with closed, and that's fine. He did so for the reasons he articulated, for the reasons Mrs. Marr just articulated. It was not a controlled circumstance in which we could contact trace. And when we're left with a situation where we could not contact trace adequately or with a high enough degree of certainty, you have to err on the side of caution. And again, not extreme caution, but you have to err on the side of caution. In this case, the high school seniors, there are many more siblings, siblings in the middle school than there are in the elementary school. And so that's where caution meets reason. And, just because there are a few siblings of, high school seniors or upperclassmen in the elementary schools, it didn't warrant reversion to full remote operations in the elementary level. So the superintendent, as he noted, in acting prudently, decided to revert to full remote operations in middle and high school. So that is really the reason the decision was made. It was not made in isolation. It was not made lightly. You're talking about a superintendent and an assistant superintendent who value greatly the needs of the children in this district, who always put their needs first, and who have placed an emphasis throughout this entire reentry plan on in-person learning. So if anyone thinks that the school leadership decided that just haphazardly that they were going to keep half the district's children from having any in-person instruction for these 2 weeks, that is an unreasonable conclusion. And it is uninformed. And it is contrary to the objectives of this administration. And I'm speaking from personal knowledge. So everyone needs to be clear on that. As to the element of the punitive nature of the decision, you know, it wasn't punitive at all, and it's unfortunate that that is the reaction that many people have. And I understand that it may be a reasonable reaction at first glance, but I think in this situation, you have to understand, and everyone on this meeting, okay, understands that parenting is exhausting. It's a difficult enterprise, okay, and we're all doing it for the first time, okay, and so every stage of development, you're a parent for the first time, and you're doing the best you can. And I am going to give the parents the benefit of the doubt and basically presume that they're doing the best they can. And they have teenage children, and teenagers make imprudent decisions from time to time. And teenagers break rules from time to time. And in this case, it was a significant rule that was broken. And unfortunately, there had to be significant consequences. But you can't just automatically blame the parents. They're probably doing the best they can. And I'm not talking about drinking. I'm talking about just getting together in a social gathering without complying with the mandated protocols that we're all supposed to comply with when we're in these sort of situations. So to just skip right to the blame game and look to drag someone to the stockade in the commons, it's not the appropriate response, because what happens is, I truly believe this, it lends itself to individuals not willing to come forward and say that they were at the party for fear of retribution from the public. And if it was a different circumstance, and if we took a different approach to this, and people acknowledge that, kids have been in very difficult circumstances here, and they're looking for some social outlets, and maybe they're not making the best decisions, and the parents can't be around them all the time when they're seniors in high school, okay? They're done changing the diapers. They're not at that stage anymore, okay? So we have to understand and acknowledge that kids are gonna make these decisions from time to time, and maybe give the parents a little more credit, and instead work together as a community to encourage people to come forward and say, hey, look, you made a mistake, but it really benefits everyone to tell exactly who was at the party, so that the district can contact trace and not go to fully remote operations, and instead remove those individuals, not as a punitive measure, but as a safety measure. So just think about that. And I think that maybe, and this is why I think that Dr. Sullivan noted in his initial statement to the community, that it can really be a learning experience. Not only to the kids that there are consequences, but also the community, and how your reaction may dictate what actions we're able to or unable to make. So I think that that's an important perspective to take. It's my personal perspective. I wanted to share it. And I think as in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I had to say about that. Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you. And I'll move on. My agenda is to turn it over now to Dr. Scollins, talk a little bit about where we are with our strategic plan, and then maybe update on some other things that happened in the district the last week or so.
Great. Hi, everybody. And so the strategic plan process is in motion. We had TLA at our last meeting to kind of discuss what our timeline would be and some of the things that are going to happen. We had a parent forum, which was so wonderful to see some parents there to give us some really good feedback about how the positives that they see in the district and some challenges they see for us, and then some opportunities. So that was wonderful to see. We will continue to have some more forums. We are looking to maybe change them to more of a virtual option for some of them. So we're working with TLA to do that. There'll also be a survey that will go out for the community so that they can give us some feedback, because we know everybody can't be on into those forums, but it gives everyone an opportunity to share their thoughts. And then we will also be putting together our strategic planning committee, and that will begin in January. So that will have leadership, it will have school committee members, some teachers and students at the high school level. So we're looking forward to pulling all that together, and that will help us as we move forward with our strategic plan. This week, we started our learning walks again. We did that last year and was interrupted by COVID. But we thought this was a good time to start, and we started at Osgood, and it was really wonderful for us to go in and see all the great things that are happening. It was nice to see teachers and children in buildings, because that's what schools are all about. Doesn't quite feel right when they're not in there. And it was really great for us as leaders to continue our work looking at student engagement and the learning environment. And we had created some look fors together last year. So we were continuing with that to see how does it look, and in particular in this hybrid mode, and what can we do to support teachers? And so I think that was a really good dialogue for us to have after we did our learning walks. So a big thank you to our Principal Farrell and all of the staff. It's always such a pleasure to go into schools and spend time. And of course, the little ones, they're just so endearing. So not that we don't love our middle and high school, we do, but there's something about those little ones that just warms your heart. So, and they were wonderful and they were fun to chat with and really wanted to share what they were doing. And one of the things I do want to share, and a little bit of a plug, as you know, we started our new math program, Bridges, from the Math Learning Center. And so teachers have been amazing. So they're in a pandemic. And now they're also adding a new math program that they have to learn. So big shout out to our math specialists, Ms. Campbell and Mrs. Thonakes. They've done a nice job working with teachers, and a huge shout out to teachers. It was really fun. We were in a second grade class, some of us, and to watch the math happening and the deep learning that was happening with those kids, learning how to break apart numbers. And the activity they were doing was a game. And it absolutely differentiated itself. So students that were still working on some of those basic computation skills, they felt successful. And then those students who really already had those numbers ticking in their heads, they were absolutely able to take it to another level and really beef up their math skills. So it was really exciting. As you can tell, I was so excited about it. But it was really a wonderful thing. And we're going to continue our learning walks throughout the year, and we'll be including more people as we go along. As we build our skills up, we'll be having more staff join us at different levels. So that's our big those are the two big things we have going on right now.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Scollins. Yeah, it was an excellent walk, and wonderful to see. You know, we're looking at student engagement and the climate of learning, and it was wonderful to see what our teachers are doing to adapt to the circumstances and how our students are adapting to those circumstances, and to provide a nice in-person education. It was, you know, there's still a lot of wonder and discovery and excitement in the rooms, which you would hope would be the case in an elementary school, and certainly one as wonderful as Osgood. So it was just a great walk, best part of my week for sure. That was a very, very nice part of my week. So one of the topics that as a school committee we realize is valuable for us to discuss, and a leadership team for us to discuss together, is the use of the gymnasium this year. And obviously the gymnasiums, I should say, in our district are widely used by various sporting and other groups in the community and in other communities. And this year, of course, there's some decisions that need to be made regarding those that are a little different because of the restrictions and the risk that could be in place for our students or other students using these sporting facilities. So I'll turn it over to Sue Owen now for just a little bit of an update on, I know she has been talking to safety officials about where we stand, and I believe we want to get school committee input. Is that correct, Sue? Regarding where we go with this, because it's an important decision, not only for our school, but really for our community as well. So Sue, I'll let you update a little bit.
Hi. Yes, we had a meeting earlier in the week with Chief Sylvia and members of the Board of Health, Pam and Mary.
Yep, you got it.
And Steve Rotundi, the athletic director, and we talked about just in general sports, winter sports, and then the use of the buildings, facilities for rentals for youth sports and other type of outside activities going on. And the consensus was that we probably should not, for safety reasons, rent out our facilities at this point. We have our safety measures in place. We can kind of govern them and control them. But when we bring in outside activities and groups of people, groups of children, we really can't govern and have the safety measures in place that we're following. And it's a whole different cohort of individuals coming into the building. So, I mean, as much as we weren't in favor of it, we realized for safety precautions, we all thought it would be best to probably table the idea of renting out our facilities at this point. And our gymnasiums right now and our cafeterias are also being used for classrooms, for mask breaks. So that would also entail emptying out all those rooms and then filling them back up with the furniture. So we were just trying to get input from school committee and what your thoughts were. And, you know, whether you agree with what we suggest, or maybe we should look into it deeper. I don't know. I know how you feel about it. I mean, we were kind of torn, but it's kind of hard to govern outside individuals coming into the buildings because we're not in the buildings when they're there.
I know a lot of nearby communities and talking to superintendents are going through the same thought process, but everyone has, you know, significant hesitancies to provide access to their facilities for obvious reasons. But yeah, so if we could open it up for Chairman McClellan, any discussion you'd like to take place on the committee, I think it'd be really helpful to us. Oh, you're muted, I think, Craig.
You're muted.
All
I
right.
guess I can
Just
start.
going around the table, Mrs. Cleary, do you have any thoughts on this? We'll get to you, Mr. Kearney.
Yeah, take it down.
I do. I appreciate Mrs. Owen's review of the meeting with some of the stakeholders in town. I appreciate Dr. Sullivan's input about, I mean, we just as a team, as a collective, as a community have been prioritizing in-person learning and the safety of our students and staff. And so I think that temporarily foregoing the opportunity of bringing outside groups into the gyms just for now makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary. Mr. Kearney?
Yeah, I echo what Mrs. Clary was saying. I agree. I also got to say, as a basketball coach, I'm disappointed. It's something that our children use more so. So, you know, that's a bummer. But I do understand. Now, was this just basically basketball? What other sports would use the gyms? What?
Well, be any of our facilities, be the auditorium, anything that people, you know, groups might want to use. I mean, clearly the gym in the winter is used mostly for basketball, but I don't know, Sue, if you have any history of, or maybe Ellen or anybody on the committee, about what the room would be used for in other ways. So I think you're on mute or.
So, I mean, we did talk about youth basketball, but we were talking about any of the buildings and renting it to any of the outside organizations that usually come in throughout our winter to use our buildings. We just felt, you know, as a temporary hold for now, that we should probably just not engage in bringing outside individuals into our buildings that currently right now have we have no safety issues right now because we're following all our precautionaries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kearney. Mrs. Marr?
Like Mr. Carney, this kind of breaks my heart a little bit. And I just want to articulate, having run Cohasset youth basketball for 5 years, these are Cohasset kids. They're not, you know, the youth basketball program is a Cohasset based thing. So there are kids in our buildings, you know, in our students. And I'm wondering if you've talked with the basketball group to see what modifications they might be able to make to their schedule. Like, for instance, the Sullivan Gymnasium, the curtains on Saturday, the curtains would be down and you would have 6 teams going at one time every 45 minutes. Would they be amenable to 2 teams at a time with a 20-minute break so people can leave and then new people can come in? I think there might be ways, and if we limit it to Cohasset only and really scrutinize outside people, because of our facilities, they are nice, and other towns have looked to us to use our facilities, and I can totally agree that, you know, we don't want anyone from outside of, you know, 02025 coming in. But I just, is there a way to accommodate? And can we look at places like the U in Hanover? Because they're running full AAU basketball programs every weekend. How are they doing it safely? What are the protocols that they have in place? Mass Premier out in Mansfield or Medfield or Foxborough, somewhere out there, they're running AAU programs every weekend. There's been no incidents, unlike youth hockey, which has been a big trigger and a super spreader of COVID. I haven't heard anything on this event. So conceptually, I agree we have to keep our buildings clean and safe. We do have staff, that, and basketball pays for custodial care. And I just think that before we say no to everything, maybe we look at the ones that impact our kids, because I also think kids were able to be outside all summer at the beach, on the playgrounds, engaged, and they're coming into, the cold, dark winter, not to have that social connection, because youth basketball is as much social as it is competitive. Is there a way that we can accommodate in a safe way? And I know the booster groups will do whatever is asked of them in terms of cleaning, crowd control, maintenance. I would just like to explore, I think we should explore it with them instead of just saying nobody in the buildings all winter long. Just
I
my,
know, just thank you for that input. Looking at the sports that are outdoors in the fall and the amount of care it took to regulate crowds, contact trace those who are coming in, obviously the intense care of the coaches to make sure that the athletes were socially distanced appropriately while on the bench. The games themselves and the contests themselves to make sure that the new rules were followed. It's a lot of meticulous work to provide that. So anything that was created in a youth sports scenario would have to replicate that. And indoors, I agree with you. I mean, there are groups that are doing this. I don't know to what degree those groups are providing safe environments or not. But I do know there are groups that are doing this and buildings that are doing this. It's just that we'd have to have our act really, really together to be able to make sure that we clean appropriately, make sure that the coaches who aren't our coaches, they're from the youth organizations, are following the rules. The athletes are following the rules, the staffing to make sure that happened. It just makes me feel a little uneasy, but I mean, I got so much out of youth sports when I was a kid, and I don't want to deter it if it's something we can make happen, Ellen. I'm like the last person to do that, but I hesitate because of those factors. So I just wanted to voice that with the group. But this is why we wanted to hear from you. We want to hear what you all feel about it.
Mrs. Marr, were you finished? Okay. Can I just ask a follow-up question, Mrs. Marr, before we move? Well, actually, Mrs. St. Ange, now that you have the lights back on, why don't we take advantage of that?
Yeah, that was not that was an in-house issue, not a town issue, but just a plug for later. Man, if I had a solar backup battery, that would have been easier. So I guess I kind of fall. I have a lot of the same questions Ellen has, and I definitely fall on the conservative side of being very careful and protecting our buildings. And right now we're not letting parents into our buildings, right? Like we're not letting anyone outside of students and staff enter our buildings. And I think that is a smart choice. I'm confused, I guess, about the limitations on athletics, because I may be mistaken in my understanding, but when we have indoor gym, like in inclement weather, the kids have to come in and do activities that like don't even get their heart rate up and make them not breathe heavily. Am I correct in my understanding of that?
I'm
Do you
not
answer?
sure.
That's my understanding from my own school and from Mr. Humans in the Deer Hill council meeting the other day, like when they do indoor PE, they can't like get to a point where they're like breathing heavily.
Yeah, it's
Right.
absolutely, they have to be conscious of it for a couple of reasons. One is because they get the masks on inside.
Right.
I haven't, the sports regulations for the winter are actually due out on Friday,
Okay.
this Friday. So I haven't even seen really what the regulations are for that officially, or
Yeah.
even really unofficially, to be honest. Just I've heard things, but I don't know how we'd even do it right now. But I know in phys ed, yes, we have to be very conscious of, keeping distance, making sure that the activities we do are a lot less of a high impact and not quite as aerobic as we have in the past.
Right. And so therein lies the disconnect in my mind. Why during our school day, if we can't have kids engaging in aerobic activity indoors with masks, why are we allowed to let youth basketball do that? And I want the kids breathing heavily and their hearts beating and getting exercise. And Ellen's right. It's a tough shift coming inside, and we want our kids to be healthy and get exercise. I just want to make sure that first and foremost, during the school week, our kids are getting the exercise they need before we offer our facilities to, extracurricular opportunities. And I just, if the winter sports, regulations aren't out yet, I'm just confused at how basketball would be allowed inside if we can't even have gym class inside at a normal level. So that is a confusing point to me.
Yeah, and just the care it takes for a phys ed class to be run appropriately indoors is a point to be made. They can do things, but they have to be very careful about the amount of contact they have, the distance they have, making sure the masks are on, following a lot of rules and regulations. And our phys ed teachers do a great job with that. Of course, they have smaller groupings now because of the hybrid scenario, but it is, all that's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that we have PE at school. The school where I work does not. It's fully remote PE on Zoom once a week. So we're very lucky to have it at all. I just want to be, I guess part of me wants to say, yes, like let's have youth basketball. That would benefit my own family and so many kids in the community. But I think that until we can be doing our gym class on a regular basis safely, I don't understand how we could do basketball safely. So that is not really an answer. It's more of a question, but that's my input.
Thank you, Mrs. St. Ange. Mrs. Marr, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I thought it would be worthy of an exploration with youth basketball, just to have the conversation with them. There's a lot of things you can do. You can play, you can do drills. You could do 4-on-4 with one coach on each team. So you're at the 10-person limit. You could space them out. I'm no way advocating saying, let's just do it. All I'm advocating is have a conversation. They might not be willing to follow the guidelines that we would require for cleaning and safety. And Lydia, I wasn't aware of the fact that the kids at the elementary school have to wear masks. That high school kids are wearing the masks when they're doing their sports, but I wasn't aware at elementary level. So that is a big factor and a big concern. So my position was just, before we make a blanket no, I wouldn't want anything though to jeopardize the safety of the buildings for education, because that's why we have the buildings. It's all about instruction and learning.
Thank you, Mrs. Marr. Ms. St. Ange, I think, sort of voiced my opinion on the matter. And I just don't know why we wouldn't take the most conservative approach possible. What we're trying to do here is get the students back into school. I understand sports are important to folks. They certainly play a meaningful role in society. But if you're pitting academics versus up against athletics, I choose academics all day long. And I think that we have enough problems as it is. And I think this is sort of tempting fate. And I truly believe that if anything's going to bring us down outside of some sort of, holiday related contagion outbreak or something like that, but if anything's going to take us down, it's going to be athletics. And I advocate for taking a very conservative approach to this. So I don't know. There's a comment from a member of the community related to this matter. It's posted by Ken. I don't have a last name or an address for the record, and so just let me. Ken, unfortunately, you're the person at this meeting that's going to cause me to remind everyone that we have to have full names and addresses just to create the record. It's a virtual meeting, but we're trying to replicate the in-person as much as possible. We need to create the record, so that's why we need that. Ken states, how can you consider renting gymnasium facilities out when the high school and middle school are closed because contact tracing was not possible after a party? I want children in school and together as much as possible, but to entertain this idea seems hypocritical and dangerous given Dr. Sullivan's tight walk with the teachers union and recent school closings. Basketball leagues are even more tightly involved with the elementary school children, and if they lose in-person learning, we will have committed an egregious error. Thank you for your comment, Ken. I think my thoughts are sort of in line with that in terms of being conservative here. So I don't know, did you want, did you want a vote or something, or what, or did you just want our thoughts, or what did you want us to do here?
Sue, do you remember was the inclination of the group that was discussing to get a vote? I mean, it is an operational decision, but like many operational decisions, some of them have gone to a vote this year because of the magnitude of them.
I mean, it was more, they were giving more of a recommendation. They said, it kind of worked the same as like the Halloween issue, like they can only control so much, which they were trying to put it in the lap of the school committee to make the decision. I mean, they made it clear that they're not comfortable and they don't recommend us doing it, but it's clearly up to the school committee on what we do with our buildings. So, I mean, I would say you probably should have a vote just so it's documented and clear. I mean, the other thing that they were concerned about was spectators and parents and, I mean, we can't police who's coming in because we're not here in the buildings. And yes, they have their coaches and we have the custodian on duty. But that's a lot to ask of them. It's just not as structured and disciplined as it is when it's just a regular school day. Sorry.
Just to follow up on the comment from the member of the public. That was Ken Belazis at 15 Ledgewood Farm Drive. Thank you, Ken, for following up with your address for the minutes. Mrs. St. Ange, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I just wondered if it makes sense if Dr. Sullivan, if you know that there's going to be a release of, winter sports or any sort of update in terms of what's permissible in terms of physical education and winter sports. I mean, might it make sense to make a decision based off of that release from the state?
Yeah, physical education guidelines are out. I mean, they haven't shifted radically, but or at all. But the sports are coming out Friday, which is this Friday. Okay. So that would give us more of an indication of the regulations and the guidelines that need to be followed by sports teams. I don't think that the restrictions are really significant from what I've been told. I think they're fairly minor in terms of, basketball, wearing masks. They're not doing, a lot of, I think there was some concerns with the passing of the ball back and forth and what would that mean? And it doesn't seem like they're changing the game much from what I've seen to account for that. I mean, from an operational perspective, I have to just put all of my eggs in the getting the kids in the school basket at this point. So as much as, I feel that, if we're making it from an operational standpoint, that's always going to be, I'm going to be very sensitive around that and try to just make sure we can get the kids in person, and anything that might cause a problem with that, that I have anything to do with, I'm going to try to limit. But I do, I do think it would be helpful to get a vote, or at least a kind of a thought from everybody on the team, just so we have, I know you have, but have something to go on as we go back and make a final decision. Jim McClellan.
Okay, so do you feel that you have the information you need, or do you want us to go around and sort of reduce our comments to a sort of a?
Well, if I'm making an operational decision, I'm gonna err on being conservative as much as it hurts me to. But I don't think it could hurt to kind of get it, maybe a distilled thought, yes or no on it. Sue, what do you think? I mean, I think we can get a vote.
Okay, so just to reduce it to sort of the most basic question here in terms of what we'd be voting on, is this really just to consider whether or not we allow non-Cohasset entities to use the district's facilities?
I think that would be the first.
Yes.
That would be the-
Non-Cohasset entities,
Well,
or just any outside entities that are not from Cohasset Public Schools?
what was the charge, Sue?
It was any outside group.
Including Cohasset groups?
Yes.
So
Okay.
any non-school
I mean,
group?
it's kind of a blanket, do we rent the buildings? Do we not?
Okay,
Right. Yes, yeah, right. Yes or no.
all right. So there's been a vote requested of us. Is there a motion on the floor to the effect of making district facilities available to non-school entities? So in other words, a vote for this would allow non-school entities to use the facilities. A vote against it would not allow non-school entities to use the facilities.
Well, Chairman McClellan, can I just make a motion that we decline to rent our school facilities to outside entities for this school year?
Sure, we can do
That
the
we're talking
reverse.
about, Dr. Sullivan? The school year,
Yeah.
right? Not the calendar year?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say we do it per season, just because we don't know, I mean, I would tend to think it's gonna be for the year, but I think it might be safer to say per season.
Yeah, right. Maybe we just say for the winter. That's a good point. Yep, okay. So
Okay,
I would
so
like to
there's-
make
so
a
there's been
motion
a
that we
motion
decline to
made-
rent our school facility.
For the winter.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, motion seconded. So just to clarify, okay, a vote in favor would decline the use of the facilities for the winter to any non-school entity. A vote against would allow non-school entities to use the district facilities during the winter time. All right, so we'll take a roll call vote. Mrs. Colery.
Aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Aye.
Mrs. Marr,
Aye.
Mrs. St. Ange.
Aye.
Aye.
Craig McClellan. Dr. Sullivan, that motion unanimously passes. So
Thank you for the
we would-
support. and
Thank you.
That was a
Thank
tough
you.
one for us too, but thank you. Okay, so next we have,
Dr. Sullivan, before you continue, I just want to ask I just want to have a question posed to you that's been posted here by
Yes.
Mrs. Eileen Norton of 390
Yes.
Beechwood. She's been waiting patiently.
teacher,
Um,
yeah, good teacher.
She said she wants to know if Cohasset schools volunteered to be part of DESE's new testing program, and if Dr. Sullivan could comment or explain on that.
Yes, so Eileen, that particular program, we did look at, it was mainly for districts that had a significant amount of students who were high needs, and in other words, were being more in person, and that these are for the districts that had large amounts of students who needed in-person learning. And the idea was that those are the ones that were going to qualify. We do not fit that qualification, so we were not going to be receiving that grant, clearly. So we actually, there's a couple of rounds of it, and we declined to apply in the first round because it was an overwhelming response, and the schools with the largest high needs population in terms of needing to be in person for more days than just a couple, we're going to get precedent. So we're going to get it on the second round. It doesn't mean we can't look at ways to potentially test, but that program was not going to be made available to us on this round based on our demographics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
So moving on, Dr. Sullivan, to the superintendent's goals.
Yes, thank you. So I'll share my, my goals. Y'all see that? So I sent this to all of you, and there are several data items that provide information that kind of gave me a basis for my goals. Still looking at our leadership vision through the eyes of a student. And you can see that 3 of the major important parts is culture, communication, and collaboration, transparency and trust, focus on working together collectively, and then also, the whole idea is improving the teaching and learning, and above everything, focusing on the student. And then a little descriptor of my philosophies, and hopefully you had a chance to look at it. My educational beliefs and viewpoints, which a lot of this was shared last year, some of it added from this year. Hopefully you had a moment to look at it. I'm kind of skipping ahead to the good parts. Our core values and goals I put in here, a vision statement, the theory of action, are 5 major pillars of the strategic plan, which should govern all goals, including mine in the district. And then the goals themselves. So these span district improvement goals, student learning goals, and professional practice goals, as noted in the superintendent's evaluation model. So the first goal is a district improvement goal, and it ties into strategic plan goal 4, which has to do with safety and security. Clearly, that's a big emphasis this year, and has been a big emphasis of this particular meeting. But the goal is, and these are SMART goals, throughout the 2020-21 school year, I will work with stakeholders to create a roadmap to reentry document. I will implement the details of the roadmap, making needed database adjustments throughout the school year. And the key actions, which you can see evidenced in the roadmap and in my sort of layout of how the roadmap was created: collaborate with stakeholders to create the roadmap, create the learning models at each level that were in place, and as we adjust and move forward with learning models, making those adjustments, present the map to families and staff for input, which I did at the end of August. If you remember, we had the family presentations for each building with the principals beside me. And then, of course, presenting to the school committee for approval. That's happened. And then implementing the safety protocols, upgrading the facilities to accommodate the social distancing requirements, which of course you've seen a plethora of, ordering the personal protective equipment as needed, analyzing and upgrading the HVAC and airflow as required or needed with our portable air cleaners forthcoming, implement training and professional development regarding the protocols, which we did with all staff, gathering and analyzing quantitative and qualitative data from families, staff, and students regarding the efficacy of the first 6 weeks of school. That was an important part of the school. Obviously, usually these goals are done a little earlier. So as we're in November, this particular goal carries with it a lot that's been put into place already, but this isn't going to stop. We're going to, as we continue to move and adjust things, as the disposition of the disease changes, we're going to have to be flexible. Ongoing presentations and question and answer sessions to clarify practices, gather data, and answer questions with families, staff, and students, which should be throughout the year. And then really to just continue to create and implement needed adjustments, and to base those adjustments based on, to base the adjustments on the data that we gather throughout the year. And some of the benchmarks that would be able to tell if we are, and I am, accomplishing this goal would be evidence of collaboration with the stakeholders, the roadmap itself, learning models created and presented for each school, the analysis and adjustments made to our airflow and HVAC, presentations created for families and staff, evidence of focus groups conducted with students, data gathered from stakeholders concerning the start of school, and obviously the presentations for data review, and then evidence of adjustment to practice based on data. I think that's a really important one regarding that goal. So I think Chairman McClellan, if it's okay, I'll go through the goals, and then if you want to go back and talk about each of them individually, or you want me to stop each individual goal, how would you like me to do it?
Sorry, I was muted. However you think it flows best, Dr. Sullivan. So you're presenting, so if you feel like
Yeah.
it adversely impact your cadence to stop at every goal, then don't do that. If you feel like
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be more effective and efficient for me to go through all the goals and then get input from the team. Goal 2 is another district improvement goal. This covers every single one of our pillars, and this has to do with our strategic plan. This is an important year to gather data, to chart a new course, a new 3-year course, bringing in all the stakeholders. And our key actions really tie in with our strategic plan process, identifying members of the strategic planning team committee, which we're in the process of doing. Really, we're in the process of communicating to. Present to the school committee regarding strategic plan, which we had our facilitators do on November 4th. Work with our consultants to create and deliver stakeholder surveys. Those are coming. Collect internal data. These dates have to shift a bit because Dr. Scollins, like we pushed these back a bit because we haven't even got it out yet, correct? Yeah, it's correct. So I'll just keep going. Conduct forums with all of these groupings. Some of these dates may change too, I should say. Meeting with the strategic planning committee, and then presenting the final sometime, we believe, in April, which should coincide with our strategic plans, or I should say our school improvement plans for the following year, because this plan will guide our school improvement plans. Obviously, the strategic plan guides everything. Benchmarks would be the formulated strategic planning committee, presentations to the school committee about the process and overview, the surveys, the internal data collected, the conducted forums, the meetings for the strategic planning committee, our finalized plan, and then finally our presentation of the finalized plan. My next goal, which is a student learning goal, is really focused on identifying closing student learning gaps, something we haven't talked a lot about, but it's definitely something that's in the center of our district bullseye this year, is looking where our students are, making sure that we set a plan for helping to fill in any potential learning gaps that have come from our very different learning models since really last March 13th. And this is something that's going to have to continue to happen, I would say, for a few years, as we really make sure that we're reaching students appropriately and moving them along in our curriculum. We can't just rely on an MCAS test. We have to have other ways to develop. And this is something that I've charged all our leaders with, and we'll be having more conversations with the community about this as we go throughout the year. So the goal is, throughout the 2020 and 21 school year, I will focus the district on identifying and closing student learning gaps that have resulted from the impact of the pandemic. Some of the key actions: hosting a meeting with parents to allow them to articulate concerns they may have regarding student learning due to the pandemic. I'm hoping to do that fairly shortly. I would say certainly before Christmas. Work with building leaders, assistant superintendent, and director of student services to create a system for identifying overall and specific student learning gaps, including some assessments to measure student progress throughout the year. We've already begun that process, and we're doing so with my monthly meetings. Is something I check on. Oversee the creation of systems that will identify specific students who are, should say, in need of support due to learning gaps. Create a short and long-term action plan for helping students who need remediation. Utilize child study teams to support students as they fill their learning gaps. Utilize professional development days to develop systems for helping students in need. And then finally, to present an action plan regarding all of this to the school committee. And some of the benchmarks from those key actions would be the coffee to discuss parents' concerns, although it's probably going to be virtual, so everyone will have to bring their own coffee. That's sort of a metaphorical coffee, I guess. Evidence of systems created to help students. Evidence of common assessments. The short and long-term action plan. may tie a bit into our strategic plan, to be honest, based on where we are right now. Evidence of child study work to fill the learning gaps at each school, professional development time at the building level to address student learning gaps, and then the action plan that I mentioned that will be presented to the school committee. My next goal is a professional practice goal, and this has to do regarding the cohesive instructional leadership team, which we've been working with for the last 2 years. Keep in mind that we've had a lot of leadership shifting in the last couple of years, so it's important to continue that work to create a cohesive team. So the idea is throughout the 2020-21 school year, I will collaborate with district and building leaders to create a cohesive instructional leadership team that continues to focus on building structures and practices regarding teaching and learning. Key actions involve working with the leadership team to implement learning walks at each building and to focus our work on the teaching and learning that is taking place throughout the district. Obviously, Dr. Scollins talked about our first one this year earlier in her update. Develop a vision and goals for our leadership team for the year, which we have. Collaborate with the Cohasset Police and Fire to strengthen our safety procedures, particularly as we are impacted by the pandemic. We've accomplished that and need to continue to refine some of that. Deliver a strategic and thorough training process for staff, which we did. Mandated trainings and trainings on safety protocols. We have very comprehensive training procedures right now. Focus on the following initiatives with each leader. This is really at the center of our bullseye this year. Academic curriculum development, professional development, what we're using it for. Those professional development days, unlike in past years when we really set them out and had them well articulated ahead of time, we've left more flexibility this year because we realize the needs of our learners and of our teachers are not necessarily apparent at the beginning of the year. We have to make sure we know what they need as this situation progresses. Communications, which hopefully you're seeing the results of in a positive way. Transportation, we have a lot of work regarding transportation. Sue's got her work cut out for her too, working with me to make sure that not only do we keep the transportation going this year appropriately, but that we facilitate a full, we're hoping, if we're in a full mode in the fall, that we are able to facilitate those start schools later bus routes. That, remember, that was going to be a big focus for us if we didn't have the pandemic, because we did shift successfully, but of course we did it in a hybrid model as opposed to everyone taking the bus model. So that's something we're going to have to work on. And one of the things we've realized in our through the pandemic is the really importance of trying to create our own independent METCO busing, our METCO buses, I should say, and for our Boston students to make sure that they have what's appropriately for them as students. SEL and tiered supports, more important than ever, really. Cultural competency, as you heard from Dr. Scollins, we did a very successful beginning to this, and that will also be part of our learning walks. Learning walks, our elementary math implementation, which I think is going extremely well, not even based on the pandemic. I think it's going very well. The staff, from what I understand and what I've witnessed, is very excited about it. As Dr. Scollins said, you can really see it across a whole building when we do a learning walk, and that's exciting. Safety, COVID-19 protocols, staff wellness, remote learning, technology, particularly on developing the responsibilities of our new position of Director of Technology and Digital Learning. That's actually a separate goal in a minute. And identifying and addressing the learning gaps, which of course is a goal. But this is what I'm talking to the leaders about when we do have our monthly meetings. This is what we're talking about. There's some other things too. But when we meet as a leadership team, we're really trying to keep focused on what the needs are of the district. Strengthen leadership meetings by creating weekly leadership Zooms. The Zoom meeting for us has been excellent. We're able to do a more deep dive when we meet in person and stay socially distanced. When we do a learning walk, for instance, or more sort of maybe a one or two topic. It might be one of the topics I just mentioned meeting, but in terms of just having a weekly check-in the Zoom meetings have been incredible for us, and they've brought us closer together as a leadership team. Create monthly visits to schools that are collaborative and outcome-based. All of our meetings need to be outcome-based, and which include learning walks, and then to support the calibration of evaluation throughout the district. We are continuing with our evaluation model. At this point, all educators have done their educator plans, and we really need to make sure that we progress with that, and making sure that our what we do provide for feedback is calibrated across the district, and it provides our educators with the proper information, so that everyone can improve, because everyone, even though we have amazing educators, everyone can improve and needs to be challenged to do so and really supported to do so. So our benchmarks for that, my benchmarks for this would be evidence of collaboration with the police and fire, which we have ongoing, training modules and presentations for safety, our learning walks, our format of the learning walks, the fact that it's taking place, evidence of the initiatives taking place at each building, establishing goals for the principals that fit within our leadership team vision. Every single leader, we do a bullseye for what needs to happen this year deeply, what needs to happen, what would be nice to happen, and then what we can attend to, but maybe not in a deep way. And then of course we drill that down with individual goals for the principals and leaders, all of which ties into our district and building goals. So our monthly visits with them, and then evidence of the structure for the new position of the Director of Technology and Digital Learning, and that's Lisa Radden's position. We're excited to have that structuring. It's important. And then evidence of our evaluation, discussion, and calibration, which we'll not only do with our evaluators, but we'll also extend that out to some other of our leaders, like our department heads, for example, to get a sense on, so they can help their, even though they don't evaluate, they can really help their departments understand, what evaluation truly should look like. And my final goal, I believe, yes, my final goal, which ties into strategic plan goal 2. This is regarding our Director of Technology and Digital Learning, and working with her to make sure that we get the most out of this position, which is really going to be valuable, not only for our technology team, but the whole district. Throughout the 2020-21 school year, I will work with the new Director of Technology and Digital Learning to improve our in-person and remote instruction and assessment. The key actions are to collaborate with the Director of Technology and Digital Learning and the Assistant Superintendent to oversee the revitalization of the Digital Learning Committee. That's important. We have the committee set, just have to meet, and we have a lot to do with them. That's coming. That's coming very shortly. Collaborate with the Director of Technology and Digital Learning and the Assistant Superintendent to identify staff needs. You can see a theme here. Perhaps my Assistant Superintendent is going to have this goal as well. I have a feeling, definitely. To create, curate, and provide professional development for staff in the use of technology throughout the year. Very needed based on where we are. Supporting class and remote instructional technology needs. And again, that's in class and remote. It's not one or the other throughout the year. As part of the district strategic plan creation process, collaborate with district leaders to create a vision and action plan for what technology should look like in classic classrooms for the next 3 years. That's an important one. This will guide a lot of our budgetary decisions. It will guide a lot of our professional development, and it needs to be collaborative. And that team, that digital technology and digital learning team, I should say, digital learning team, will have a big say in that strategic part of the strategic plan. And then finally, to establish the responsibilities of and the instructional and systematic focus for the Director of Technology and Digital Learning, and support her in the implementation of these responsibilities and systemic focus. It really should be, it's providing it, establishing it with her. She's going to have a great say in it. She brings a lot of expertise, and making sure that we use that expertise to help our district in new ways. And she's already getting a really good picture of the district at this time. It's an interesting time to be put into a technology leadership position, for sure. Some of the benchmarks are revitalized digital learning committee with a new vision and mission, and goals for the year and for the 3 years, really. Comprehensive digital resource guide. I had mentioned that it will govern our budget allocations for technology for sure. Fluid FY21 PD calendar, we do have already. December 14th is definitely about technology. I can foresee more PD happening, not just on the days we have set, but all the time with technology. Evidence of collaboration between the staff and the Director of Technology and Digital Learning. And then evidence that supports the focus of our technology efforts and our future technology vision. So I want to be able to provide for you the data that helped us develop the vision, which I also will include for you. And then finally, the strategic plan, which we're creating as a district, including technology considerations that obviously impact teaching and learning. So I guess at this point, Chairman McClellan, I'll turn it over to the committee to ask any questions or to give any thoughts on these goals. And thank you to those who helped work with me to at least get a draft down moving forward.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for that very detailed overview of those very important goals and for all the time and effort you put into developing them. Any members of the committee that would like to comment? I'll go around the table. Mrs. Cleary.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. I want to just say that our goals are usually done earlier as well. We're working on that. We've had a couple of things derail us, all in our timing and deadlines. And so I appreciate you getting all of this done. And so.
Thank you.
Mr. Kearney, do you have any comments for Dr. Sullivan on his goals?
Yes, great goals, and we're excited about it. I can't tell you how excited I am for the strategic goals for the next 3 years. I think that's one of the most important things on there. It's how do we collaborate as a community to reach these goals, and they're not only your goals, but they're all our goals. And I appreciate you taking the timeless effort to put this all together, and appreciate your leadership on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kearney. Thank you, Paul.
Mrs. Marr, I know you had a lot of involvement in this. Do you have any comments?
Do I have any comments? I'm struck with how, the goals are timely and really relevant to what's going on right now in the district in terms of looking at the learning gaps and technology and, the investment we put into staffing and that. And so I'm very excited that Dr. Sullivan included them in his goals. And I look forward to updates throughout the year.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for your support in drafting them too. Much appreciated.
St. Ange?
Yes, I think this is a very thoughtful collection of goals. I think we definitely see evidence of you working on these already. I'm particularly excited to see goal number 3, just identifying and closing student learning gaps that have resulted from the impact of the pandemic. I think that, as a school committee and as a parent and as a teacher, that's a really major concern for me. And just to know that that goal is coming from the top in our district means a lot. And so I think we can do a lot to support our kids. And I know we are working on that. So I just like seeing it in there. So thank you for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mrs. St. Ange. Mrs. Caleri, you had some comments to add?
Sorry, I hit the mute button too early. I just had just a few quick things. I wanted to highlight that goal number 1 has been a Herculean effort. And I think that you and your leadership team have done such an outstanding job. With just roadblocks coming up after roadblocks, you guys have created a really outstanding reentry plan and have continued to improve upon it. And I really appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to raise, to sort of echo Mrs. St. Ange's comments, but expand upon them a bit, I just wanted to encourage the district to really sort of, I see sort of coming down the pike, the reintegration of the TECA students, as much as it's a small population, being an interesting one. And so I just wanted to highlight, and also sort of given who, I don't know who went TECA and who didn't necessarily, like I'm not well acquainted with the demographics or the grade levels. I know it was pretty well distributed and there weren't that many students from each grade, but I would be interested to see what the learning gaps are once we start to reintegrate those students and families into the district. And then the only other thing I would say is that I see everywhere in here the words collaboration, evidence, strategy. I just really love that about it. And you guys, I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for that. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thank you for that, Mr. O'Leary.
And yeah, the TECA, that's right on our list for sure to look at those students very carefully.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan. Does that conclude the superintendent's report?
It does. I wanted to say one more thing about Thanksgiving. Just
Okay.
I'll get this out in my newsletter, but for planning purposes, we do, as most folks know, it is a half day on the calendar on Wednesday. And even though it's a remote day, we are going to follow that half day schedule. We know that, people aren't traveling as much, of course, but, time to cook the turkey, and we're going to stick with that. So we do have a stop time of 11:15 at the middle school and the high school, and 12 p.m. at the both elementaries. Just wanted people prepared for that's when the remote assignments and work and learning will cease on that day. And it's coming up. I can almost taste the mashed potatoes. So and that is it, unless you have anything else, either Sue or Dr. Scollins.
Before we move on, just because I saw some comments from or questions from members of the public pop up, and I'm sure that that you and Dr. Scollins are always the bells of the ball, so to speak. So before we move on from your report, let's hit those questions so that maybe you can provide some of these members of the community answers to their questions. Miss Abigail Sullivan of 87 Pleasant Street asks, is there an update on the plan to send kids back on Wednesdays? I know the teachers are expressing concerns. I'm curious to hear an update on the status of this plan from Dr. Sullivan so families know what to expect. It will affect childcare and work schedules, and helpful to know the plan as soon as possible. Thank you. And Dr. Sullivan, I know you had mentioned this at the very beginning. As we know, people sort of drop in sometimes late. So if you could just hit that again, I think that's a good point. Let's bring that up again so everyone's clear on that.
Sure. Yeah, it is our anticipation. We are anticipating that December 9th will be the beginning of our alternating in-person Wednesdays for our students, which would mean that cohort A would be going Tuesday, December 7th in person. Monday, December 7th in person, Tuesday, December 8th in person, and then Wednesday, December 9th in person. And then the next week, cohort B would be going Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we'd alternate moving forward. We do anticipate, because of the need to provide common planning time and of course contractual preps and time necessary for everything that's happening, that we will have an abbreviated day in some fashion at the elementary schools on Wednesday. The exact time of that we're still discussing, and that's where we are right now. Is that fair to say, Chairman McClellan? I think that's
it is very fair. Clearer. The school committee unanimously voted in favor of this plan on October 28th, and nothing has changed. Yes, there has been some demonstrations, some efforts of the teachers to make their some of the teachers, not all of them, but some of their positions known on the matter, and that is their absolute prerogative and an important part of the process. But nothing to date has caused the school committee to change its position on that. And so on December 9th, cohort A, be ready for your first 3-day week. That is the plan. There may be a some concessions for planning time in terms of the length of the school day itself. We're still working that out what the schedule will be, but it's not going to be a half day. It'll be, probably be an early release day, but it'll still be a close to full day. So be prepared for that. And, I just think it's appropriate for me personally. I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but, I'm absolutely, as I know Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Scollins is, I'm absolutely committed to maximizing in-person learning as soon as it's possible. So to me, this is just a stepping stone to more in-person learning. As soon as we find a way to manage that in each building, it's going to happen as far as I'm concerned. We need to do it. So, we just have to take it, step by step. And so barring any sort of crazy, contagion outbreak following the Thanksgiving holiday, count on it. Cohort A, December 9th, Wednesday, December 9th. Next step in the process. Okay, so thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Sullivan, because,
Thank you.
I think that it was early that we mentioned that. It's important that everyone hears that. The message is clear, especially in light of recent events that may have caused shed some doubt on that element. So thank you. Next is a comment from, again, from Ken Belazis of 15 Ledgewood Farm. I don't know if it's road or drive. He states, while addressing Dr. Sullivan's goals, we are curious as to what he is forecasting for discussions with the recent protesting teachers and the MTA. Does he anticipate we will be implementing rotated in-person learning on Wednesdays beginning in December, as previously discussed and coordinated with the roadmap presented and addressed with the MTA at the start of the school year? I think we just answered that. And not to confuse the MTA with the CTA. MTA is, of course, the Massachusetts Teachers Association. CTA is the Cohasset Teachers Association. The Cohasset Teachers Association is the teacher association that that we bargain with in this process. So thank you, Mr. Belazis. I think we clearly just answered that question. It was a sort of similar questions, concerns Mr. Sullivan had. Next, we have Mr. Sean Casey of 100 Pleasant Street. He asks, will the school be allowing the varsity and junior varsity basketball teams to play in the high school gym against the other towns? Will parents from other towns be allowed to enter the building for those games?
So that will be covered. We don't have the information around the guidance yet. That's coming this Friday. So after looking at that guidance and analyzing and meeting with, obviously we have an excellent athletic director and principal meeting with them, and we will be communicating that very shortly thereafter, but we don't even have the official guidance yet. So that is all predicated by that guidance. So believe me, we will be communicating that as soon as we are able to.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Next is from Joe Donovan of Norfolk Road. Mr. Donovan writes, I hear the comment from many in this meeting, quote, following the data, unquote, but none is given. Schools in Sweden never closed. According to a recent NPR article from November 13th, they say Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Italy have all kept schools open with emerging evidence that schools are not a major center of transmission. There seems to be quite a few studies stating that schools are not super spreaders. If we keep talking about quote unquote until it's safe, unquote, that means kids will never get the education they deserve. Recent article in NPR had Dr. Milani from University of Michigan say, quote, the data so far are not indicating that schools are not super spreader sites, unquote. I understand there was fear the first few months when we wanted to make sure hospitals could handle COVID. 10 months later, we are still not back to education at level kids deserve. The well-being of our children on all levels needs to be addressed, not just fear of COVID. What is the data that says schools should not be open full time? I would love to understand the data.
So those are thoughtful comments. The data really that we're anchoring on right now is coming from the World Health Organization. What is it? The WHO, World Health Organization, and the Senate. And other data that says that we have to follow social distancing requirements, which at a minimum is 3 feet, and a lot of practices say 6 feet. So really, for us, we do have a low rate of transmission here in Cohasset, and then we have no known cases to be associated with our schools. So what's really stopping us right now is the need to make sure that we follow those social distancing requirements that have been set by the state and have not been forgiven for us. And that includes our transportation, which of course has some bearing on everything we do. So that is the information and the data that would basically tell the WHO that that's important, is what creates that. And we're right now following that order for us as a school district. Until that order is changed, we'll do the best we can to look at how we can get more kids in the building, but it'll be a bit of a challenge to make sure we stay within those guidelines. Not just guidelines, it's an order, it's a rule.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Moving on to the next item in the agenda is the finance report. Turning the meeting to our Director of Finance and Operations, Ms. Susan Owen.
Hello, everyone again. Who's driving?
Oh, I can do that. Here we go.
Here we go. So just giving you a monthly update. This is the month from July through the end of October. You can see this is a school budget summary. We have, bottom line is we've expended 31% of our overall budget. Being as it's the fourth month, average would be 33.33%. So we're pretty much right on target on our spending. There are several areas that are at a higher percent. Special education tuitions is one of them. And then the special education transportation. With the transportation, we have several credits coming back to us. And we also have renegotiated some of our costs for outside transportation. So those percentages of expenditures should be coming down. The next slide is the summary budget to actual expenditure. So it gives you the actual budget allotment. It gives you, can you go up a little bit more? There we go. What has been expended, what the balance is, and you can see the percentage expended, and then what's been encumbered, which is what is on a PO. So some of our expenses we do put on purchase orders so we can encumber our finances to give her a better projection of what the end of the year will look like. The next slide is the summary. Next page. Here we go. So here is a summary of the revolving and grants. This is actually the grants with the fund numbers, the opening balances. So the only opening balance we had was circuit breaker, which we carried, and the credit for life we're carrying. Then it shows us the receipts, which is really our allocation. It's not what we've actually received to date. It's what the government has allotted us. We have to draw down off of that. What has been expended in each one of the grants, what's been encumbered on each of the grants, which again is on a purchase order, and then what the fund balances are. So you can see the CARE grant, the school reopening grant. We still have some expenditures. I know we just put through quite a bit the month of November. So you should see that on the next report. Those grants will be pretty much expended. And it just goes down the list of all the grants. And the next row is revolving. Same information. You'll notice there's let's see. There's one area that is in deficit. It's the Skipper School. That's just a matter of we sent out notices to collect payments that we have received some, but not all to date. So that $642 will be gone on your next report. The next page is I thought it'd be interesting to give you a grants historical because the questions have come up what we usually get from year to year. I went back as far as FY17 to give you what the grants have looked like for Title I, Title IIA, Title IV, the SPED IDA, the SPED Early Childhood, and the METCO, and then also the circuit breaker, just to give a comparison year to year of what our grants look like. The next page is the balance of our capital. I thought I'd share that. I know questions have been asked about what we have left, what we've spent. We had a nice walkthrough yesterday with the group. We walked through all our buildings, and it just did a capital walkthrough with our principals, giving us a tour of what things have been done in the schools and what things we're asking for and what our needs are. You can see there's a couple outstanding projects. One of them is the split AC in the band rooms, which we saw yesterday. And I believe the other one is fixing the courtyard doors. There's $20,000 there. They think they may have found a much cheaper fix to that, so that $20,000 may not be utilized. We're not sure yet. We're gonna wait for a few good rainstorms to see if the fix worked. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's another slide after that, Pat.
Good.
So I don't know if there's any questions. I know I went through that pretty quickly. I'm happy to answer anything. Each month I'm trying to give you more and more details. I think out of the box of what would you like to see. If there's anything that you're not seeing that you'd like me to add in the next month, that would be great. Just let me know.
Thank you so much, Ms. Owen. Are there any questions or comments from Mrs. Owen going around? Mrs. Caleri?
No, thank you, Mrs. Owen.
Mr. Kearney?
Thank you, Mrs. Owen. You did a great job on this. I appreciate it.
Mrs. Marr?
No questions. Mrs. Owens has answered my questions. We talked about, the amount of encumbrances, and this capital budget report is great. If you look at how they're detailed out, it's tough to move something as specific as repair, replace courtyard doors. But if other courtyard doors in the district need repair and replacement, that fund account can assist if we don't use it all at Deer Hill, because it doesn't say specifically to Deer Hill. And this is a good tool for us to manage our capital budget requests.
Thank you,
That's
Mrs. Marr. Mrs. St. Ange, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. Thank you so much, Mrs. Owen, for that report. And moving on, the next section is the school
Thank you.
committee. Thank you. Next section of the agenda is school committee comments and communication. I know that we have a report from the Alternative Energy Commission. Mrs. Marr, do you want to sort of lead that off?
From last night?
Yes, well, Mrs. Bodell is here to present. I knew that you would
so sorry.
work with her on.
Shall I promote her?
Actually, Mrs. St. Ange was at the last meeting. She might
Okay.
have a better perspective.
Sure, Mrs.
Yes.
St. Ange, just sort of introduce Ms. Bodell and explain everyone what we're about to hear, and then we need to promote Ms. Bodell, Tanya Bodell, to a panelist.
I will promote her as you speak.
Thank you.
Great. So Mrs. Marr and I have been the school committee liaisons to the Alternative Energy Committee, and then also Mrs. Owen and I have been the school committee liaisons, the very frequent attendees of the recent RFP evaluation committee. And so we are at a very exciting time, I would say, in our town's history in terms of pursuing a mini grid or a muni grid, words that I just casually throw around now, thanks to Tanya and her committee. And the town put out a request for proposal for solar for the town of Cohasset. And at the town meeting, the town voted, and the school committee and the town voted to give permission for the school roofs and properties to be considered as a part of this bid. And so we received 9 bids, and we've reviewed them and interviewed them over the past couple of weeks. And so now I believe Tanya is going to give us an overview in layman's terms, which is much appreciated because there's a lot of jargon out there. And so I know you've put together a presentation that we can all understand and digest tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Lydia. And I just want to also say thank you to Lydia and Susan for their work on the evaluation committee. It's invaluable. and to Ellen and Lydia for attending our meetings every month and working with on this. We're very excited about the results of this request for proposal. I'm about to share my screen, if I could, to present a summary of what's happening. There are some pretty lengthy appendices that get into some of the details from a legal point of view, as well as for anybody in the finance area, how we might restructure some of these options to bring in more money to the town and to the schools. But there are some opportunities for the schools specifically, and we are going to emphasize those. With respect to the schools, we understand that some of these options may not be available, and that's fine, but we do hope you'd seriously consider some of the options that have been presented. So I'm about to share my screen.
I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to do it.
All right, very good. And I just have to find it. I have to show all windows is what I have to do. Hold on, sorry, I'm sure this is at the very end. Yep. Okay, I'm going to put it to slideshow so that we can see this. And I'm hoping everybody can see this. Yes?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so as I said, we're going to summarize our RFP process, where we came out, what some of the considerations are for the school. I'm going to emphasize that we need to really move on this because some of the big ticket incentives at the state and federal level expire before at the end of the year. But I think we're in a position to do this if you can get your arms around that. So that's the purpose of today. The appendices, as I said, have how the savings work and some other structures that could potentially double the value that we have. The good news is this is a very successful RFP to date. We have a potential for $75,000 to $125,000 in annual savings applied to electricity bills per year. Currently, we have saved $185,000 on the existing landfill that is shared with the schools. This has an opportunity not just to create savings, but to also increase reliability and resiliency. So if the lights go out, the schools can still be fully powered with a combination of solar and battery, if that's the path you choose to take. Otherwise, we can just focus on the cost savings and bring in some pretty significant savings for the schools. So I'm going to just run through this. As I said, there's some pretty nice incentives. We're at a great timing to enter into this contract. We want to and need to enter into the contracts before the end of the year to move forward. The bidders are willing to work with us and move quickly. The request for proposal has taken place over the last 6 weeks, and the evaluations, we have gotten our arms around the different financial approaches that we could take and what the potential savings are. But again, we're looking to present to the select board on December 1st. I think members of the planning committee, not in an official meeting capacity, are listening in, and we're looking to also present to the advisory committee. The goal of this for us was to get some price transparency across all of the different options that we have. And as a result, we got 9 bidders who offered 16 sites. The 6 sites that the town got permission to authorize permission to lease, including the 3 schools, public sites that have been identified by the bidders and the Alternative Energy Committee, including the library, town parking lot, the wastewater treatment plants, and the MBTA, and then 5 privately held sites in town. It turns out under the state incentive program, if we as a town take off 100% of the output from that site, we get the same incentives as if it were on our own property. And that's very important because some of our sites in town are not the best. Some of them, but we give up something for that convenience. But that said, we're talking now as part of the negotiations with a selection of the bidders to really maximize how we use the incentives. So the mission was accomplished. We can now compare economics of the potential sites. And the other thing is those 16 sites that were presented, if we took the offers from all of those sites, not only would we way exceed what the town needs, we would have 9 times what our town needs. And that equates to about 1/3 of the entire community's usage. So what do we do with that? That's something the Alternative Energy Committee is thinking about. We haven't fully come to a conclusion on that, but one of the options is if we feel like we can site these solar energy arrays in town beyond our own usage, we could share some of the benefit with another town. We would have those assets in town and be able to make money off of the lease payment. So proposed sites could service 1/3 of our load. This is the fun part. This is where we get to show you some of the pictures that were in the proposals, just so you get a visual of what the solar would look like. This is the DPW site. This site has the best incentives if we can build on that site. This is where our existing solar energy array is. We could get another, almost the entirety of what we're looking to fill for the town's load. It would be at very rich incentives, rich prices, rich benefits, but there may be some limits, and we're working through that. Any configuration above 500 megawatts, which the schools could have, but they've been sized below that because of incentives, anything above 500 megawatts is required to have a battery. So that decreases some of the savings, but even with the battery, there's still cost savings for these sites, a combination of battery and solar. Third-party sites, I just want to give a shout out to Palmer Capital and Gordon Dean and Scott Kaplan and Palmer Capital, as well as Don Stasko, because they put together some proposals for the Stop and Shop site, Abishan Hardware, which would be able to be sold to us and to other people in town and to other municipalities. That could serve as backup power for those buildings when there's an outage, but it's fabulous, very creative thinking. So thank you to our local businesses for thinking about us. The other thing is parking canopies. When we did a proposal, when we went out, gosh, I guess now 8 years ago, carports were way expensive. They're now competitive with rooftops. A little bit less savings, but they're competitive. So the bidders offered up potential carports, and these are the canopies that go above parking. You've seen them. I know you've seen them. You've seen them at the airports. You've seen them at the MBTA station in Hingham. We're looking to potentially get them at the MBTA station in Cohasset, but they protect the cars. They keep the snow and the rain off the cars. They create shade, and they generate electricity. These, this proposal are the 3 schools over to the left, the town parking lot in the to the right, and those at the schools could go directly into the school to feed the school's electricity directly. So that's called a behind the meter configuration. They also could just be sitting there and serving, selling directly into the grid. So we're looking at which is the best. Obviously, if it's going straight into the schools, we could have a what's called a microgrid, where there's a combination of a solar battery storage so that the schools would not have to rely on gas or diesel fuel for backup generation. We could still keep that as sort of a backup to the backup, but it could create, if there's a gas pipeline issue or if there's a problem with transportation to get diesel fuel here, it would provide resiliency, reliability. The schools could stay open. And it's especially important for Deer Hill, which has the Emergency Response Center. So again, something that the schools, we'd encourage you to think about. Here's some images of what the rooftop solar would look like. And something that I found on the internet looked just like Deer Hill, not just like Deer Hill, but a lot like Deer Hill. So you could get a feel for what the carport might look like. And as I said, they can either deliver directly to the schools or into the grid. They did offer also batteries. There's a price that comes with it. It's about $1,000 per kilowatt. So there are some choices for the schools to think about. Are you comfortable with carports? Does the school want the ability to be able to operate completely off the grid, pull some switches, and it doesn't matter what's happening in Cohasset, which has outages all the time, as you know. The schools can operate on their own with no to low carbon emissions. And do you want to use gas turbines as a backup? And that's fine, because that's what we use now. So right now, I think we're focused on optimizing the solar savings and thinking about going to a FEMA grant or some other type of grant to get some funding for a battery. That said, the bidders offered possibilities in this area. Other schools have installed solar carports. We're not the first mover. It's a proven technology. Here's a list of some of those schools. I think that Lydia has reached out to some just to see how they work. There was concern, is this going to be safe? How is it going to happen? Again, Susan and Lydia during the interviews had great questions tied to protecting our students and protecting our school roofs and parking lot assets. So it's not new. Now, solar is crucial for realizing maximum savings. There's cost savings, resiliency tied to the microgrids, potential town reliability. So the entire town, if we wanted to go that path, we're skating towards the puck. It's not ready now, but in 5 to 10 years, I guarantee you, there will be a lot of towns that can get off the grid. Technology is going there. The cost savings are going there. The schools are involved in all of these. So we would encourage the schools to think about how we can work together on this. And then the last is the relative cost savings for each of these. And this is where the evaluation committee is really emphasizing where we want to go first. The first is a landfill or even a potential third-party site where we could get the same amount of savings, and that provides the most savings. The second is the school roofs, but we also know the school roofs are going to be replaced in the next 10 years. Every bidder has said replace it first. That doesn't make sense because then we lose the 50% cost sharing from the state. So we as a committee are basically thinking that's not going to happen now, but it could happen in the future. And the schools could also in the future lease out their new roofs once they've been replaced to make lease payments, make more money as there's more solar put on. So DPW site, maybe, for the reason I discussed, school roofs, maybe. Carports, again, the next most highest value. Small town buildings, we can get some of this. Third-party sites generally are not going to give us as much savings because we have to pay a lease payment to those. But we are looking at some of the options to be able to change that. So that is something we're looking at right now. And then we're not even looking at the uneconomic sites. If it's not creating savings, we're not pursuing that because the savings was in the warrant article. So that's our focus. Here are different combinations. I'm just gonna, again, run through this so we can have some discussion. If we were to go for our total usage, and that's not renting out above and beyond our usage or over procuring, get more credits that we could then get a piece of if we sold it to somebody else. These credits basically are like somebody saying, look, if you give me $1, I'll give you $1.05 back. And that doesn't sound like a lot until you multiply it times 2 million kilowatt hours. And now it starts to be $20,000, $40,000, $80,000, $120,000 worth of savings. So this would be the order of priority. The schools, again, have some great potential, but if you don't do the roofs, we still have the possibility of carports. And if that's a non-starter because we don't want the ability to have that access of directly to the energy to the schools, we are looking at third-party sites. Right now, those provide the least amount of savings, but there might be some ways we can increase that. So that's where we are. I think I mentioned there could be leases, there could be out-of-town off-takers, we could allocate credits, community solar, lots of opportunities to play around with these incentives. I look at this honestly as the state and the federal government have thrown a bunch of money on the ground. Our town, if we can get these contracts in place before the end of the year, are in a prime position to be able to pick up a bunch of that money, save some for us, and share it with others who aren't in the position we are in right now. And in addition to the cost savings, it creates some of the building blocks for resiliency and reliability that in this town at the end of the line, with outages all the time, we would like. So we're here, we're trying to move forward to get this signed by the end of the year. I will leave it at that and see if there are any questions or concerns.
So I got so many windows open here between the comments and the all my dialogue windows here. I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you so much, Ms. Bodell. I'll go around the table here and see if any of the school committee members have any questions for you at this juncture. Mrs. Colery.
Thank you. As someone who has done a school committee meeting in the dark, I am a huge fan of anything we can do to improve our town's renewable resources. I just, this is why we're eager to start the new schools committee and want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, but I would be thrilled to be able to participate in any of these projects through school facilities.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Cleary. Mr. Kearney.
Yes, I'd just like to thank you. This is exciting and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mar.
Thank you. It's been educational, you know, listening to this. A lot of times I feel like it's Greek and I'm trying to interpret because I'm not savvy in this area, but it's been great and I appreciate all the work you did. You know, the quandary is, do we accelerate our request to the town to replace our roofs so that we can participate in this process? I think that the town, you know, may be amenable to that, but the problem is the MSBA pushed out the guidelines for roof replacements under their accelerated repair program to 25 years. So we talked about it last night. It pushes us out to, I want to say it was 2023, 2024, and 2025 for our buildings. And, you know, the reimbursement from MSBA can be in the 40% range. So that's a lot of money to leave on the table. You know, it would have to look at balancing it. It's a terrible quandary to be in. The solar canopies, the parking canopies are interesting. I only have one concern that I'm sure can be addressed is the configuration at the middle high school over the student parking lot. It makes sense over staff parking lots. I'm sure staff would appreciate having coverage in inclement weather, but it's the student parking lot and the visibility to that, which is a very congested, active parking lot, you know, twice a day, and how we could manage that. I don't know if you have any insight, Tanya.
So again, this is not an all or nothing. In fact, I think Osgood and Deer Hill would be my prime targets to start. Even if we can just do Osgood and Deer Hill, that provides those canopies provide actually a lot of energy. So if you're uncomfortable with a Cohasset High School middle school, if you don't want to, I don't know what the new school, how it's going to be located, but there might be a optionality. You don't want to take away that space in case you're going to use it. I would just focus on Deer Hill and Osgood. The other thing is, you know, as you know, technology today, you can put cameras underneath for visibility. And that's definitely, you know, obviously with the cameras, there's a recording, it can be online through the internet. Somebody can be monitoring it, but you wouldn't have to monitor it all day because it's, like you said, only during the heavy traffic periods. So that's an option. If the visibility is a concern at the high school, middle school, and that's the overriding concern, I think there's technology that could address that. And if you just put a poster with big eyes, that's been shown to make people feel like they're being watched. So they do the right thing as well.
May I
Thank
chime
you.
in on that just because I was in the interviews as well? Is that okay?
Sure, you're next anyway, so go for it.
Well, I don't want to take Ellen's time. Ellen, did you have other questions? Okay. Susan and I asked quite a few questions about the canopies because we thought, geez, that's something that's new and different and will raise a lot of questions in town. It's visually quite different. I think it can be perceived two ways. It can be seen as like, wow, we are really alternative energy forward and we are making a move. And one of the presenters said, like, this is a big stance to take. And it shows that we as a community are investing in this progress. Other people can interpret it as an eyesore, and that's just the reality of how people might interpret it. I mean, luckily, most of these sites are tucked away. I mean, more so at Deer Hill and Osgood. They did make the point that in terms of engineering, the bases are all very heavily reinforced. So if something were to bump into it, it wasn't going to be a safety issue of anything, you know, teetering. Like they're all very well engineered and taking into consideration that these are a parking area. Another thing that we brought up was, you know, in Deer Hill, hold on one second. And some of these areas are where carpool gets in and out. So we would have to do due diligence with the designers to make sure that, you know, our kids and staff and everyone's being taken into consideration in the flow. You know, a parking lot is not simply a parking lot. There's a flow of people and traffic going in and out. And that is something that's considered in the design process. They're just looking at these images and placing their sketches on them, but it would be further designed. Also, I was concerned about snow and rain because I have solar on my roof, and a few great points were brought up. First of all, the angle is quite different. This is about a 3-degree angle, and there are gutter systems built in and kind of these like stopgap areas so that snow and rain would not be flowing off the ends of it. It's kind of rerouted out to edges and gutter systems so that it's not falling onto our people. They also are taking into consideration school buses and snow plows. So like there's plenty of room, and LED lights on the underneath part so that not only are you getting shade, but you're safely lit. You think about this time of year until about February, and it's dark when people are arriving and leaving, and you want to feel safe and secure, and you want to be able to see when you drop your bag or your keys. And so the LEDs are up underneath the canopy to provide that extra feeling of safety and security. So I just felt very reassured. This is obviously not the first time that companies would be installing solar, and they've thought through a lot of this. And there are some schools that are nearby enough that if we felt the need to go tour it, we could absolutely go tour and experience it firsthand, or we could go to the Hingham MBTA parking lot. But I think it's nice to see it in a school setting if we want to.
Great summary, Lydia.
Thank you, Ms. St. Ange. Are there any further comments or questions from the school committee? Can't see everyone at once right now because that's being shared. So let me just scroll through everyone here. No? Okay, well, thank you so much, Ms. Bodell. Appreciate that. Wonderful presentation. It's exciting. It's exciting to think about, and there's a lot to consider.
Thank you very much. Ms.
Thank
Wood.
you.
Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda. I have two permanent agenda items, which is goals and the new schools committee. Does anyone have anything related to goals? I know that we have to have another workshop scheduled. I'd love it if someone just got the email chain going so that we could schedule that.
I'll do that after the meeting.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything to add relative to goals right now? I don't think we would because we haven't had a workshop, but okay, seeing none. New schools committee, Mrs. Marr raised a good point. I think it was Mrs. Marr. Someone told me that, and I'll just sort of talk about what this is. This is, again, we reconstituted a new school facilities committee, or it's not new. It was an existing committee that hadn't been reconstituted since the 70s, which is, in my opinion, fairly evident given the school buildings that we have. But so it is reconstituted in an effort to reassess the facilities that we have in the district and what modifications or new construction might be warranted. A committee is necessary to do this. It's a multi-year process. And so I'm leaving it on here so that we can raise it every single meeting to remind people that we're looking for participation in this. I think to date we have 2 applications. We need 5 individuals to start, and we only have 2 still. And that's been the way it has been for, I think, like a month and a half or so. So I know there's, I've talked to some people and there's a little bit more interest in it, but I don't think they've received any additional applications. To Mrs. Marr's point, we have it listed as the new schools committee. I think it's actually called, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Marr, I think it's called the school facilities committee. Is that what it's called? So if you're going on, what you do is you just go on to the Cohasset website and you follow the links to, or search for it for committee application. And it's just it's a generic form from what I saw, and you just write the name of the committee. So the committee would be the school facilities committee. It's an important task. I mean, this is, if you have kids in the district that are going to be in the district for years to come, we're looking to get, you know, possibly new facilities here. I mean, it's a pretty major deal. So it's important. And I don't even know if it's appropriate if I'm on it or not, but if no one else does it, I'm going to do it just to get this going. You know, this is going to be like, if it's the last thing I do, I'd like personally to see new buildings here, and it very well will be the last thing I do probably. But I want to see new buildings. I do. I you know, at least especially the middle high school. we can do better. We can offer better facilities to the kids. And like I know, one or more committee members went to school in these buildings when they were kids. So, I mean, come on, we need to move on to the next, the next generation here. So please, 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 if you have any interest in this stuff, I know I see a lot of the same names making comments in these meetings. I see a lot of the same people getting active and participating in the school district. This is a really great way to do it. And I'd really implore you to consider this. So thank you. That's just my plug that I'm going to put in every meeting until we have new buildings for this. All right, moving on to the next item, reports from subcommittees. Any reports from subcommittees or liaison positions that will go around? Mrs. Caleri?
No reports.
Thank you, Mrs. Caleri. Mr. Kearney?
Well, I mean, we did the walkthrough yesterday, if you want to bring that up. That was
Sure.
very, it was awesome, to be honest. It was awesome that we were able to take the time and go through all the schools and see what they needed. And we'll talk a little bit more with that with capital. Just happy to see it go that way, that getting everybody involved. It's great.
Thank you, Mr. Kearney. Mrs. Marr, do you want to expand on that, that subcommittee report from our experience? I don't even know when it was, yesterday?
Yesterday, sure. Sure. I just want to backtrack on the goals. I think,
Sure.
well, Mrs. Colery is going to get something set up for us. Now that we have Superintendent Sullivan's goals, we should kind of look at them and not be in lockstep with his goals, but we really should all be working towards some of the same things. So we should look at the content of his goals and how we as a committee can support them and help achieve some of the objectives he has set forth for the district. Just my 2 cents on goals. So the walkthrough was great. We had capital budgets there last night. We had the chair of the select board through the middle high school portion. We had advisory, we had capital budgets, and of course the administrative team. And nobody knows their buildings better than the school principals, who gave us very specific guided tours of the things that are most important to them and their staff and their students. Some are aesthetic in the sense that things need to be replaced and fixed, and then things that are safety concerns. So I'll be writing up a summary of that. We discussed how we wanted to prioritize some of those items, and we should be getting on capital's agenda fairly soon for a first overview with them. But I think having them there last night was very important, that they actually see what we're asking for, as opposed to a Excel document with a request on it.
Should just make a safety point. One of the reasons that we did it yesterday is because our deep cleaning was today, so we wouldn't have students in the buildings after we had been in the buildings. So someone's listening and saying, "Oh, all these people went to the buildings now." We took care of that with our deep cleaning. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Mrs. Marr, does that do it for you?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. St. Ange, any updates?
My updates are mostly solar oriented. We also had a Deer Hill Council meeting, which is nice because we're kind of now on a regular schedule. It's nice I feel like, anything to feel regular and normal these days. So there we are, on track.
Okay, thanks. I think it's a good sort of opportunity to just again thank the building principals, along with what Mrs. Marr was saying. Yes, they were present at the walkthrough for each of their buildings, but that's just one of the many, many examples that we see, or in which we see the building principals just burning those extra hours with us to ensure that our operations are running as smoothly as possible, and the kids have the best possible experience given these very difficult circumstances. The building principals have been an invaluable resource and have absolutely and positively shown their tremendous commitment to our overall mission as a district. So just wanted to take the opportunity to thank them. As Mrs. Marr mentioned that, I think it's important to really recognize. So thank you. So anyone else have anything that they thought of regarding reports, liaison positions, or any updates? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Next section is approval for minutes. Mrs. St. Ange, I don't think there are any minutes this week, right? Correct. Okay, so no minutes to approve. I do not have any topics that weren't reasonably anticipated within 48 hours of the meeting, unless I'm missing something. Does anyone have anything? No. Okay, so we'll move on. No reason that I know of at this time to move into executive session. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Sorry.
Motion made by
Second.
Mr. Kearney,
Thanks,
seconded by Mrs. Colery. All in favor indicate so by saying aye and roll call. Mrs. Colery,
Aye.
Mr. Kearney,
Aye.
Mrs. Marr,
Aye.
Mrs. St. Ange.
Aye.
Aye, Craig McClellan. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night, everybody.
You too.
Too. Thank
Thank
you.